This is my third time having to record this video because my audio is not working, so bear with me. I think I'm going to have to use a voice memo and line it up with the video for my camera and just do it like that, so the audio might not be that great in this video, but that's all I got right now. I think I'm gonna have to get a new microphone. As you can see, I'm back in my childhood home. This is my bedroom, and this is my little guy, Hugo. He's not very happy with me right now because first of all, I just woke him up. Second of all, I've made him sit next to me for filming this 3 different times. And he hates cuddling and being near people. Lovely dog. And third, I have been giving him a haircut the past few days because it's a multi-day process. So he's not very happy with me about that either. Hello everybody, happy Frog Friday. My name is Carly and this is Hugo. Today I'm going to be talking about horror books that you should read while camping. So these books either take place at a campsite in a tent or in a cabin or just in the forest in general. I originally wanted this to be a reading vlog where I read a bunch of books in these settings while camping because, as you know if you watched my last video, I just spent a week camping out in the woods for my last class of undergrad, which you know I had to pull out that alumni sweatshirt for my first video back. But unfortunately that did not work out because the first night I got about 20 minutes of an audiobook done before I fell asleep, did not give any updates to a video, and then I didn't read at all the rest of the week because we were getting up for class at like 6 a.m. every day and not finishing until 10 or 11 p.m., which is when we would then have to go back to the campsite and all share 1 to 2 showers depending on where you were. So there were 30 of us trying to get in 1 or 2 showers all at the same time. So I did not go to bed until like 1 or 2 a.m. every day, and then I had to wake up at 6 a.m. So I was not getting any reading done, needless to say. So while I said that I didn't read any of these, I'm going to start off with 3 that I did actually read. And the first one is The Troop by Nick Cutter. And this one is about a Boy Scout troop that every year goes out to this like forested island for a 3-day camping trip. But this one particular time, they're greeted in the middle of the night, I think, by this man who's kind of like crazy and they don't know, this stranger, and he's clearly sick, and it turns out he's infected with something and it starts spreading to people. It kind of turns into like a Lord of the Flies situation where all these kids are left to their own devices. There's a lot of body horror in this. It's very like graphic, like makes you sick, and there's also a lot of animal abuse and torture. There's one like kid in particular in the troop who's very sadistic, so that's kind of where that animal abuse comes into play. So if you're at all triggered by that, I would just skip this entirely because there are many scenarios where animals are being tortured and killed. Now, I read this one about a year ago and I think I gave it 3 stars, but looking back on it, I probably should have given it 5 stars because I still think about it and it did such a good job at grossing me out. So the reason why I gave it 3 stars is probably the same reason why it should have actually been 5 stars, because it was very effective. It was nasty. So I would definitely say I would only recommend this to you if you're fine with body horror and like gross things. It's not a very good intro horror book, which is how I used it. It was the first or one of the first horror books that I read. So I think that's where I went wrong with that one. And I specifically picked this one up because I saw that it was blurbed by Stephen King as being a book that really scared him, so that interested me a lot. Speaking of Stephen King, the next one on my list is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon by Stephen King. This is about a little girl who is about 9 years old, and she gets separated from her mom and her brother on a hike in the woods. They're kind of walking in a line, and she's at the back of the line, and her mom and brother are fighting in the front of the line. So they don't notice when she has to go pee and she kind of goes off the trail. So by the time she turns around to go back on the trail, she realizes she's lost and they're gone. And by the time the brother and mom finally turn around, they realize that the sister/daughter is gone. So the whole story kind of follows this little girl as she's trying to survive in the woods and make it out alive. It can be considered supernatural, but also not. It's kind of ambiguous what kind of creature is following her around. Is it just an animal, or is it something supernatural? The one thing that I've heard of as a complaint for this book is that there's a lot of baseball in it. Tom Gordon is a baseball player on this girl's favorite team, so she kind of mentally gets through this whole thing by each night turning on her little Walkman radio and listening to the baseball games being broadcasted, which I like baseball, so it wasn't a problem for me, but I've heard that that is kind of boring for a lot of people. But I think this is a really good intro to King. It's only about 200 pages, which is kind of unheard of for him for being that short. And it's one of his books that I think a kid could read, which there's very few of those. It doesn't get too gruesome or anything like that. Next is Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell, and this is the one that I did start reading last week during my class, and I finished it the weekend after because I wanted to finish the book. It isn't really taking place in the woods. It's basically this couple goes on a weekend getaway in this cabin, and while they're there at night, they start hearing these weird voices and sounds coming from outside their cabin. Then when they leave, which is where most of the book takes place, like outside of the cabin, when they go back to their normal life, one person in the couple, these voices never leave her. She's slowly deteriorating and getting more creeped out and freaked out, and she keeps hearing these voices and like talking in her sleep. The voices are like sounding like people that they know. So it's definitely creepy. I will say in that 20-minute span before I fell asleep when I was listening to it, I did have to pause the audiobook a few times because I was like freaked out and I needed to like listen to my surroundings in the forest. So it did scare me. Did a good job at that. I think I gave it like 4 or 5 stars. The narrator did a really good job at like making that creepy sounding voice from outside the cabin. So now if you see me looking down, it's because I will be starting up the books that I have not read, so I'm going to be reading off the summaries from Goodreads. So the first one is Campfire by Shawn Sarles. While camping in a remote location, Maddie Davenport gathers around the fire with her friends and family to tell scary stories. Caleb, the handsome young guide, shares the local legend of the ferocious mountain men who hunt unsuspecting campers and leave their mark by carving grisly antlers into their victims' foreheads. The next day, the story comes true. Now Maddie and her family are lost in the deep woods with no way out, being stalked by their worst nightmare. Because there were other, more horrifying stories told that night, and Maddie's about to find out just how they end. So this one sounds like the ultimate camping story. It's got kind of everything. Like you have not only the woods, but you also have either the tent or the cabin, and you have it actually like scary stories around a campfire. So this is like as close as you can get to the setting. I wish I had given this one a shot. It's also pretty short. It's only like 200 something pages, I think. 293 pages. And then there's In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. What should be a cozy and fun-filled weekend deep in the English countryside takes a sinister turn in Ruth Ware's suspenseful, compulsive, and darkly twisted psychological thriller. Sometimes the only thing to fear is yourself. When reclusive writer Leonora is invited to the English countryside for a weekend away, she reluctantly agrees to make the trip. But as the first night falls, revelations unfold among friends, old and new. An unnerving memory shatters Leonora's reserve, and a haunting realization creeps in. The party is not alone in the woods. So this one doesn't sound like it's really like your classic camping book. It's more just another one of those remote cabin in the woods scenario. More seems like it's kind of your classic like thriller mystery type of thing, not so much horrors. Next up is These Silent Woods by Kimi Cunningham Grant. This one has a 4.13 rating with 40,000 ratings and 6,000 reviews. So that's pretty good. It says, no electricity, no family, no connection to the outside world. For 8 years, Cooper and his young daughter Finch have lived in isolation in a remote cabin in the northern Appalachian woods. And that's exactly the way Cooper wants it, because he's got a lot to hide. Finch has been raised on the books, filling the cabin's shelves and the beautiful but brutal code of life in the wilderness. But she's starting to push back against the sheltered life Cooper has created for her, and he's still haunted by the painful truth of what it took to get them there. The only people who know they exist are a mysterious local hermit named Scotland and Cooper's old friend Jake, who visits each winter to bring them food and supplies. But this year, Jake doesn't show up, setting off an irreversible chain of events that reveals just how precarious their situation really is. Suddenly, the boundaries of their safe haven have blurred, and when a stranger wanders into their woods, Finch's growing obsession with her could put them all in danger. After a shocking disappearance threatens to upend the only life Finch has ever known, Cooper is forced to decide whether to keep hiding or finally face the sins of his past. So this one's got that Appalachia remote cabin in the woods vibe. Not really camping, just like actually living out there. The cover has snow on it, so it might be a good winter read. I don't know if I'm the only one, but listening to that summary, it really reminded me of The Spite House, with a father kind of running and hiding with his daughter, and you're not really sure why. Kind of like a mystery vibe to it. So I wonder if it has that same kind of twist or reasoning why he's running and hiding. I'm not going to say what it is because that would be a spoiler, but that would be an interesting comparison if that was the case. Next up is Devolution, a first-hand account of the Rainier Sasquatch Massacre by Max Brooks. As the ash and chaos from Mount Rainier's eruption swirled and finally settled, the story of the Green Loop Massacre has passed unnoticed, unexamined until now. But the journals of resident Kate Holland, recovered from the town's bloody wreckage, captures a tale too harrowing and too earth-shattering in its implications to be forgotten. If you hear a vacuum, I'm sorry. I am back home, if you can't tell, my childhood room, which means my family has, of course, decided that it is a deep cleaning and vacuuming day in this household when I'm trying to film. In these pages, Max Brooks brings Kate's extraordinary account to light for the first time, faithfully reproducing her words alongside his own extensive investigations into the massacre and the legendary beasts behind it. Kate's is a tale of unexpected strength and resilience, of humanity's defiance in the fate of a terrible predator's gaze, and inevitably of savagery and death. We must accept the creature known as Bigfoot walks among us, and that it is a beast of terrible strength and ferocity. So this one you have Pacific Northwest. It looks like it's snowy. You're just in the woods, not necessarily camping, more of like a hiking vibe with cryptids. Clearly this one's about Bigfoot, and this is the same author that wrote World War Z. So if you read that and liked it, maybe this one will be a fun one to pick up. Next up is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. 15 years ago, summer camper Emma Davis watched sleepily as her 3 cabin mates snuck out of their cabin in the dead of night. The last she and anyone saw of them was Vivian closing the cabin door behind her, hushing Emma with a finger pressed to her lips. Now a rising star in the New York City art scene, Emma turns her past into paintings. They catch the attention of Francesca Harris White, the socially and wealthy owner of the very same camp Nightingale. And when Francesca implores Emma to return to the camp as a painting counselor, Emma sees an opportunity to find closure and move on. Yet it is immediately clear that all is not right at Camp Nightingale. Already haunted by surfacing memories, Emma is suddenly plagued by a security camera pointed directly at her cabin, mounting mistrust from Francesca, and most disturbing of all, cryptic clues Vivian apparently left behind about the camp's twisted origins. And as history begins to repeat itself and 3 girls go missing again, Emma must face threats from both man and nature in order to uncover all the buried secrets, including what really happened all those years ago. Reading that summary really made me think of American Horror Story 1984, where someone goes back to a camp where they witnessed a massacre years ago, and then things start happening again that are replaying the same type of scenario. So if you like that, maybe you'll like this one as well. I'm sure there's a big twist in this one, as Riley Sager always likes to do, and it's probably going to be a little out there because most of his books are. I feel like if you've read his books before, you'll know whether you should pick this one up or not. People either love him or they hate him, I feel like. This is more of that summer camp, sleepaway camp type of vibe rather than like camping with your friends or family or hiking. Next up is The Woods Are Always Watching by Stephanie Perkins. It says it's a companion to There's Someone Inside Your House. And just a little warning, this one is 3.08 stars from 7,700 ratings, so that's pretty low. Bears aren't the only predators in these woods. Best friends Nina and Josie spent high school as outsiders, but at least they had each other. Now, with college and a 2,000-mile separation looming on the horizon, they have one last chance to be together, a 3-day hike deep into the woods of the Pisgah National Forest. I don't know where that is. Do you guys know where that is? Simmering tensions lead to a detour off the trail and straight into a walking nightmare, and then into something far worse, something that will test them in horrifying ways. Obviously, this one is hiking. I'm gonna look up where Pisgah National Forest is real quick. North Carolina. Okay. So we got some North Carolina representation in this one. One thing I will say about this that I know is that it is YA, and I've heard that it has a lot of YA tropes, so if that's not your thing, I would skip out on this one. I'm probably not going to end up reading that because I usually don't like YA. Next up is The Ritual by Adam Nevill. 4 old university friends reunite for a hiking trip in the Scandinavian wilderness of the Arctic Circle. No longer young men, they have a little left in common, and tensions rise as they struggle to connect. Frustrated and tired, they take a shortcut that turns their hike into a nightmare that could cost them their lives. Lost, hungry, and surrounded by forest untouched for millennia, they stumble across an isolated old house. Inside, they find the macabre remains of old rites and pagan sacrifices, ancient artifacts, and unidentifiable bones. This place of dark ritual is home to a bestial predator that is still alive in the ancient forest, and now they're the prey. As the four friends struggle for salvation, they discover that death doesn't come easy among these ancient trees. So this one is clearly more of a paranormal, I'm sure it's more of like a folk tale type of vibe. I will say that this one, I know, tends to be pretty slow paced, people say. It is 420 pages long, so I can definitely see how it would be a slow burn type of book. Also, I think this one is a movie, so that might be fun to kind of read and then watch the movie and see how well it's adapted. I'm a wuss when it comes to horror movies though, so I have not seen it. Next up is The Tent by Kealan Patrick Burke. This one is a novella. It's only 134 pages. I did really want to read this one since I was literally sleeping in a tent, but I only had the EPUB of it. I didn't have an audiobook, so I didn't end up reading it. The Perfect Getaway, The Perfect Place to Hide, Hocking Hills, Ohio. Interesting. You don't really see much representation for Ohio in books. That's kind of... I can't think of literally any other book that takes place in Ohio. Hocking Hills, Ohio is an oasis for campers, hikers, nature enthusiasts, and for those who just want to get away and lose themselves in the wild. And as long as you follow your guide's advice and stay within the permitted areas, you can expect to survive the night. Because deep within the dark woods, something insidious awaits. Something few have ever seen, something ancient, unknowable, and insatiable. If you go down to these woods today, you won't live to see the sunrise. I have heard that this one just kind of gets really weird, and I remember someone saying it wasn't their favorite by the author, but they still thought it was a fun one. I definitely think it would be interesting to read while actually camping out in a tent. I wish I had gotten to it. Next up is Camp Slaughter by Sergio Gomez, and I feel like I've seen this kind of everywhere recently. It's a local legend. No one is sure if this Camp Slaughter place is real or not, but a group of college kids renting out a cabin deep in the woods of Pennsylvania will soon realize the truth. They'll realize the danger too, or rather the cannibal out in the woods will bring the danger to them. Okay, so we got some Pennsylvania representation in this one, if that's what you're looking for. I've heard this one is really good if you like slasher movies, because that's kind of the whole thing. It's not like super well written or anything. It's just like that fun, that sounds wrong, like fun murder methods, I guess, that you know how slashers are. Like, there's lots of like creative ways that people get killed. So if you're into that, then you might like this. It also says it is #1 in the Slaughter Books series, so I guess if you end up liking it, there's more to pick up afterwards. Sorry if it's getting dark out. It is getting later in the day, and I did have to refilm this because I lost all the audio, so it might be getting pretty dark in the video, but I'm using natural light, so I can't really do much about it. Next up is Cannibal Creek by John Athan. Like, this has to be a pen name, right? Otherwise, I would like to meet this man's parents because they have a good sense of humor. That's straight up just a first name split in half. That's literally it's just Jonathan, but he split it in two. Like, that's some top tier naming if their last name was Athan and they decided to name him John. It's amazing. But anyways, to the summary, it says, while traveling through West Virginia on a camping trip, the Bakers and the Riveras, two close-knit families, have the misfortune of running into a peculiar hitchhiker. After ditching the hitchhiker, the families set up camp and begin their vacation. However, they soon find themselves stalked by a group of feral, cannibalistic people lurking in the woods. Okay. So that sounds like a more intense version of Camp Slaughter to me. I've literally never heard anyone talk about this one. I do really want to read it at some point. It definitely sounds kind of gruesome, and I would like pick it up. It also has splatterpunk in the genres on Goodreads, which I don't see very often at least, so that's kind of interesting. And it has a warning in the summary, just so you know. It says, this book contains scenes of graphic violence, including some sexualized violence. This book is not intended for those easily offended or appalled. Please enjoy at your own discretion. You don't see that many warnings straight up in the summary, so that might be pretty intense then. I'm definitely interested in checking that one out. Got some cannibals coming into play now. Next up is The Ruins by Scott Smith. Trapped in the Mexican jungle, a group of friends stumble upon a creeping horror unlike anything they could ever imagine. Two young couples are on a lazy Mexican vacation, sun-drenched days, drunken nights, making friends with fellow tourists. When the brother of one of those friends disappears, they decide to venture into the jungle to look for him. What started out as a fun day trip slowly spirals into a nightmare when they find an ancient ruined site and the terrifying presence that lurks there. Okay, so this one doesn't really seem like it's like the others. You don't have that cabin or campfire or sleeping out in tents. Most of these are like the Appalachia or Pacific Northwest, but this one is in Mexico in like a rainforest. I would probably save this one for more of a beach vacation or tropical area rather than camping, but I thought I would still include it in here. Next up is The Haunted Forest Tour by James A. Moore and Jeff Strand. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Haunted Forest Tour. Sit back and enjoy a smooth ride in air-conditioned comfort as your heavily armored tram takes you through nature's most astonishing creation. The forest is packed to capacity with dangerous and terrifying creatures of all shapes, sizes, and hunger levels, and you'll get to observe these wonders in complete safety. Howl with a werewolf, gaze into the glowing eyes of a giant spider, look right through a spooky ghost, see horrific monsters you couldn't even imagine only inches away from you. Things with fangs, things with claws, things with dripping red jaws. You'll see them all. Not thrilling enough? Well, it's Halloween, and so we're offering a very special tour through the haunted forest. The new route goes deeper into the woods than any civilians have ventured before, and you're guaranteed to get a good scare. Rest assured that every possible security precaution has been taken. The Haunted Forest Tour has a 100% safety record, and technical difficulties are unheard of. You will be in no danger whatsoever, we promise. I bet that's so true, and nothing happens. Everything goes perfectly fine in this book. This one, I definitely still want to read. I haven't read anything by Jeff Strand, but I feel like every summary that I read of his books pulls me right in. I definitely need to check him out as an author. Specifically this one seems pretty fun. I don't know why, but it reminded me of in Harry Potter, you know, the bus that drives crazy fast and just can stretch and compress and comes out of nowhere, that skeleton drives. It's like a crazy bus. That's what I thought of when I thought of this bus. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a scary horror. It just seems like it would be a really fun one. It doesn't really say on here whether it's adult or YA or what, but in my head, this seems like one you could kind of read to kids too, but I could be completely off on that. And scrolling down a little bit, someone described it as felt like Jurassic Park had a baby with a monster. And someone else also said, starts with a great creature feature Jurassic Park premise. So if you like Jurassic Park, you might want to check this one out. Next up is The Night Will Find Us by Matthew Lyons. In this supernatural thriller, 6 teenagers attempt to survive the horrors, both human and supernatural, that haunt them as they try to escape a seemingly infinite forest where far older, crueler things wait for them with plans on their own. Steadily picked off one by one by this malevolent force and their turned friend, hope finally comes for the survivors in the form of their respective bonds to the forest itself. Once a long-buried secret, the other an uninvited connection that allows one of the friends to see further than she ever could before. Together, their fight to finally escape will take them to the heart of the woods and the secrets buried there, but only one of them will make it out alive. Ooh. So, spooky woods vibes. If you like one-by-one type of things and figuring out, fun thrillers of who's gonna survive, maybe check this one out. Oh, it is listed as young adult, though, so I'm not sure how people feel about that. I'm usually not a big fan of young adults, so I don't know if I will check it out. This one says cosmic monsters, angry teenagers, very tropey. Okay, so yeah, it does seem like it's a YA type of thing, so if that doesn't bother you, maybe check it out, but if you are easily annoyed by YA tropes, maybe skip out on this one. Okay, and then the last one I have here is The Hike by Drew Magary. Don't know how to say his last name, sorry. When Ben, a suburban family man, takes a business trip to rural Pennsylvania, there's another Pennsylvania rep in here, he decides to spend the afternoon before his dinner meeting on a short hike. Once he sets out in the woods behind his hotel, he quickly comes to realize that the path he has chosen cannot be given up easily. With no choice but to move forward, Ben finds himself falling deeper and deeper into a world of man-eating giants, bizarre demons, and colossal insects. First, I want to say this has a super cool cover. It's definitely giving also more science fiction fantasy vibes, not straight horror, so if that's not your thing, then maybe skip out on it. And I don't know why, but when I read the summary of this, my head immediately went to Terry Pratchett's Discworld series. I'm feeling like there's similar vibes, but take that with a very small grain of salt because I have not read The Hike and I have not read Discworld. Just for some reason, it was reminding me of it, so maybe they have similar vibes, maybe they don't. I've had this one on my TBR for a really long time. I really want to pick it up. The only thing I've heard about this really is that it's just a really weird horror book. So if you're looking for something else that's weird and unusual, doesn't follow the general tropes that most things do, then maybe pick this one up. And that's all the books that I had on my list. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And if you've read any of these books and have strong thoughts either way on them, let me know down below in the comments. I definitely want to get to some of them, but I would really like to know which ones I should prioritize and which ones I can just completely avoid. For today's frog fact, I'm going to be talking about flying frogs. And I put flying in quotation marks because they're not really flying. You're not going to see them like taking off or anything, but basically they're just super aerodynamic. There are certain species that have like extra skin flaps and webbing in between their arms and legs, pretty much to brace their fall from jumping from trees. So an example of this is the Wallace's flying frog. I'm going to try to find a video and put it down in the description box below if you're curious at all, because it is pretty cool. It's one of my favorite frogs that I've learned about in my class. I never knew that there were frogs that could glide or fly before this past semester when I learned about them. And that's all for the video. I hope you all have a great day, and goodbye.